of our speakers spoke 2 years ago, so thank you for doing this again. We're excited to hear how things have changed since. So again, if the three of you could just introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about how you were diagnosed. And I'd love to hear from each of you what the hardest thing has been about dealing with having DADA2. And also, if you could share if there's anything, that it's actually added to your life that you're grateful for.
Sure. I guess I get to go first. My name is Adela. I'm actually an engineer, and I was diagnosed with polyarteritis nodosa when I was 17. High blood pressure, unexplainable, right? Like I was 115 pounds, no one knew what was going on. I had weight fluctuations. I've been seeing doctors on and off since I was 2. No one knew what was going on, right? No one knew what the literature was like. I went to college. I went to college in Boston, much to my parents' chagrin, because I was in LA. So I was 3,000 miles away from home. And there was just a lot of disagreement as to what was actually happening, because I wasn't quite following the literature. Fast forward to my senior year of college, this is 2014, so this is about, a span of 5 years or so. And they determined that I still had signs of inflammation and decided to switch treatments and put me in prednisone and all sorts of different things. They didn't know what was going on, so I said, I do not want any more medication. Take me off of this. I want you to figure out what's going on. None of the doctors had any real idea, so I took it upon myself to find resources and get actually genetic testing done. So Baylor has a lot of experts in this field, and I reached out to geneticists there. They had me sequenced. So in 2015, 3 years ago, I actually was found to have the DADA2 mutation. One of the 2 different ones. One is more harmful than the other. And basically submitted my own proposal to Dr. Kastner for me to be admitted to the study. And I've been here ever since. I have now forgotten what you wanted else to say.
I wanted to hear about what the hardest thing was.
Sure.
I know there were many. And then also if there's anything, if there's anything you can point to that having this has added to your life that's been positive.
Sure. The hardest thing for me was the level of uncertainty that I'm sure you all have gone through of what is actually happening. Is this genetic? There were so many questions, especially when I was going through high school. My parents didn't know how to deal with most of that, and that was very difficult because they were actually adding to my anxiety. So all those things combined made it actually very challenging. And then navigating from pediatric care, where everyone really does care about you, to adult care, where no one really cares anymore because you're not interesting. That was also a transition. If anything, what I have sort of see as something that I'm able to contribute in is actually dig into the science and try to help people understand what's happening. Try to create awareness and show folks that, explain, right, that this is not just one case that, you will never use one and done, it's 1 out of millions or something like that. No, this is part of a larger thing, right? There are 7,000 rare diseases out there. There are a lot of unexplainable things. There's a lot that you can do, and sort of, I like the coping mechanisms. I make my own T-shirts whenever I go to the NIH, because that's sort of a thing that I bring humor to the team and humor to myself when I go and sort of have this sort of serious talk about how do I take care of myself, right? So.
Hello, I am Thijs. I have written a whole speech, so I'm gonna keep it to the pages. I am here with my dad and my younger brother, and I want to tell you some more of the side effects of DADA2, in particular about depression and loneliness. When I was 7 years old, I was happy. I had a lot of friends with whom I played and get up to mischief. I could get along with school. I had almost everything under control, but then I get my second stroke. My first stroke. Sorry. This stroke happened in my hypothalamus, where everything is arranged in my brain. So it had a big impact on my life. I was taken to the hospital in Amsterdam, and after recovering, I was allowed to stay the days between Christmas and New Year at home. On January 1st, I had to go to a revalidation center an hour away from home to learn how to walk properly again, how to ride a bike, how to find the right words again. During the time there, I got a lot of mail from school, but once I was home again, I was changed due to the brain damage, and my friends didn't want to play with me anymore. And then I also had to go to the special school. Since that period, I never really made new friends and was very lonely. It was a difficult time for me, but also for my parents. I also have a younger brother with similar problems, and he also has ADHD, and autism. As a family, we survived it all, but as a person growing up, it is very difficult to search your own place in society. I was not able to do the things I used to do. Studying was difficult because I couldn't think as fast and I was used to, and I could not remember everything I had learned. My hometown was never the same because everyone knew that I was sick, and I had a feeling they were avoiding me. At age 19, I have made a couple of new friends during school, but they all left me when I suffered another stroke in my brain stem and had to be hospitalized again. But against all odds, and still not knowing what the hell was going on with me, I had to go on, and I did. I finished my education and even got a job in healthcare with elderly people with dementia. I felt great and accepted, but after nearly 2 years, they had to let me go due to job loss. That was hard to swallow, but together with my parents, I found another job. In the year 2015, we were invited at the academic hospital at Utrecht, where a pediatrician had heard of a disease discovered in America that looked a lot like ours. We had to give permission to research our DNA. We are very glad we did, because we finally got the answers. Our parents were both carriers of the DADA2 gene, and so my brother and I got the full heredity of the disease. My brother could finally get on medication for his ADHD, and we both got the weekly injection with Embrel. Our life looked a lot better from that day. Although I always wanted to be a doctor, I am now working as a cab driver for almost 2 years, and that's a lot of fun. My brother has additional gamma globulin therapy once every 3 weeks due to a Staphylococcus aureus bacterium on his skin, and currently lives in a care facility nearby and is doing well. Sadly, I got skin cancer last year. No doctor believed that the spot was something to worry about, but my specialist at the AMC in Amsterdam sent me to the skin specialist, and they saw immediately that I was right all the time, and that the spot turned out to be a basal carcinoma. Not very dangerous, but again something where I have to take care of in my life. Me myself live in the same village as my parents, they are always there for me, and we do a lot of things together. But what I miss the most is going out with friends and having a girlfriend who understands me. I go on dates, but it mostly stops at the first date because I can't say that I have a genetic disorder, and I wonder how to tell her. I do also think that she's gonna run from me if I tell her, so it is very difficult. Living with DADA2 is hard, lonely, and makes your life difficult. There is nothing to see at the outside, and people do not understand what this disease does to the patient. And doctors only find it very interesting to have you as a project. I am very glad that my life now has meaning because I have joined the local sports club with my dad, and I am leading a youth group. I also have a little dog named Flip, who makes my life worth living. Most of all, I am grateful that my parents never gave up believing and stimulating me, because that makes who I am today. I hope my story makes doctors, parents, and patients who are attending this conference realize how important it is to stay alert on the loneliness that comes with living with this disease. Not only the patient is feeling loneliness, but also the parents living with children experience this. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I've been doing a lot of college applications lately, so I hope I can get all the information out relatively consistently and quickly. But I was 8 years old when I first had my stroke, and I was telling him about it. We shared a particular experience where we were he was watching TV and I was playing video games, and all of a sudden there were two TVs, and as a kid you don't really understand that sort of thing. So I told my mom my eyes were all wiggly, and then she called my doctor and he told me to take a nap and see how I felt after I woke up, and I still had very little motor function in my right eye, and I was having those sort of complications. But then after a while, my doctors just kind of looked at it as, this is like a freak accident, you're an outlier, that type of thing. They didn't see any point in following through. They put me on aspirin, as most people usually do with a stroke, which we now know is counteractive with this disease. But my mom, fortunately, is relatively persistent and made sure that she could, because she didn't think that that's where it stopped, because obviously everyone thought it was strange for an 8-year-old to have a stroke, but my mom found it obviously particularly strange. And we got in contact with the Vasculitis Foundation when in 6th grade I was diagnosed with polyarteritis nodosa as well, which we now know mimics DADA2. Around that time, it was just because in between the time I had the stroke and between the time I was diagnosed with PAN was a lot of high fevers, stomach pain due to the cell explosion that can cause perforated bowels like my sister had. A lot of those sort of complications, as well as hypertension in your kidneys. And then we got in contact with the Vasculitis Foundation, who helped us get in contact with the NIH. And at the time, I was being loaded up with prednisone, as many people have been when they're first diagnosed. And I was pretty thankful to show up at the NIH, obviously, and have all the research done. Obviously, I think it's very important, the stuff that you touched on, because growing up with those sort of things isn't something most people find particularly normal or fascinating at that age. So when I was missing school a lot, and when I was in elementary school having to adjust the way I looked at the board because of my stroke and the motor function in my eyes, people asked about it. I would try to explain it to them, but kids who don't have these problems don't really have as much empathy towards that situation because they can't understand it. So you get kind of used to just being like, oh, well, it's a long story, and you kind of just carry on to that sort of thing. I was relatively fortunate to surround myself with people I felt as though could be more understanding. And I think that has definitely been a benefit of growing up with a disease like this, because you're able to find people who are understanding versus people who are just going to look at you like, oh, well, you're different, and kind of see that as either a threat or a reason not to associate themselves with you. But once you start weeding through all those people and you find the people who actually do want to understand and actually feel for you and will work with you, which is a lot of people in this room, it's an extremely humbling experience to get to know those people. And it definitely helps a lot growing up. And I think before, even when I was having my bouts with, at the time, what we thought was PAN, I was pretty good at keeping my hopes up for my future. I never really looked at it as a reason to feel sorry for myself. And I know obviously it's very easy to start to feel that way, and it's not impossible to avoid it. But it is important that people understand, rather than looking at your situation as a reason to seek pity from others and to feel sorry for yourself, it should be a reason to, you should use your special scenario as a reason to do right by yourself and those who have supported you through your struggles, because then once you've gone through all those, you now are able to say that you made the most of what you dealt with. And I think my mom helped me a lot with that, because before we knew about the disease, I did a lot of work with the National Stroke Association and Strikeout Stroke, trying to educate people on the signs and symptoms so that people could treat that relatively quickly. So education is obviously important for everybody, and I kind of went through that, and that's a big deal here with the DADA2 Foundation, because I think it's something pretty amazing for people to be able to come together and actually find something in common, especially from all over the world. I've never talked to anybody from the Netherlands before until after the DADA2 Foundation conference 2 years ago. And I mean, that's a privilege to meet a lot of other people who have gone through something like this and can empathize with you and understand you, versus when you're growing up and you have a lot of people who just don't understand. You get used to just saying it's a long story versus actually getting into the details.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm sure a lot of people have questions. I'm going to go straight to the floor.
Very interesting to hear about your stories. I have a question to Thijs. How long have you been on Umbrel, and how do you find it is working?
For 3 years, and we never had a problem with it. We take one injection a week, and we never had a problem with it.
Your brother too?
My brother takes it too. I think 2 weeks after me.
No, it was 3 months after my brother started, and I got really. No, it was later. A year.
A year.
I'm on it for 5 years right now.
Mm.
And then I got really sick, and then I had to start it.
And no problems after Umbrel?
Yes, I have vasculitis sometimes in my feet, but that's because I sit a lot on the plane, and well, I have to take care of myself because I have sunscreen. I rub myself in with sunscreen every time the sun shines, because I don't want to catch cancer anymore. And I have a bottle of alcohol in my bus so I can clean my hands because germs. So you got a few precautions.
I mean, I have been on Enbrel too for the last 3 years, and it is pretty transformative, right? Because now you're not having to take like an antibiotic along with cyclophosphamide or something like that, or you don't have to take methotrexate and worry about folic acid, or you don't have to worry about all these other side effects. It's sort of like, because it's such a targeted therapy. When I was in a high stress position at my previous job, it was remarkable to me that I had no more rashes. So all throughout college, I had joint pains, I had rashes. The last month of the semester would always be just in incredible pain. And it's not like you can tell your friends, like, I'm in incredible pain right now, and I don't really want to go to this meeting, right? Like, you have to show up, you have to pull your part. Like, there's a lot of things behind the scenes. in that job, I realized that I had no more physical, like, negative feedback coming back to me, right? So I had no more pain. So for once in my life, it was the mental part that was actually affecting me, because I passed that physical barrier that, like, I was like, oh, this is so weird. My life is like normal now, right? So it's been pretty life-changing from that standpoint.
So I'm on Humira now. I was on Enbrel for a little while, and what we started to see, that was after the first visit, I believe, and then by the time I came back for the second visit was because I started to have rashes due to inflammation on my legs and fevers starting to appear again. And that wasn't particularly, the rashes weren't something I had had before using Enbrel, so they assumed that they were minor symptoms that were appearing due to my body rejecting Enbrel. So then we switched to Humira, and I've been on that for how many years? 2? Almost? A little longer than 2 years. And I haven't had any problems with that. I take it every 10 days. As far as getting sick easily, I haven't had any problems with that, but I also think I like to tell my friends that it's mind over matter, kind of, because once I start taking Humira, you know, obviously it's important to worry about the different ways it affects people differently, but I think I've been relatively good about keeping myself clean, just washing your hands, just doing the regular stuff you usually would, and I haven't had any problems with getting sick either. So, but it has helped a lot, and I haven't had any problems with it. My body doesn't seem to be rejecting it or building antibodies against it. So I think everything's going just fine.
I was just wondering if you noticed a difference when you switched from Enbrel to Humira with a burning sensation or something like that, because I know we switched with the higher concentration of Enbrel, and our son had a really hard time with that. So I'm just wondering if you found that difference as well.
Well, when I had Enbrel, it came in an EpiPen, and as you could imagine, that was a surprise to a young boy to have that. But then switching to Humira, I was warned that it had a relatively high pH level and that it was acidic. So I usually do the injections with lidocaine, which usually helps. And then you still have to do it a little slower because once you push the air out and you put the lidocaine back in the injection, you start injecting the lidocaine first, and it'll still sting after a while. But that kind of helps get rid of the burning or stinging sensation when you inject Humira. As for the Enbrel, we never really had various options. We just had the one EpiPen, and that was just kind of touch and go. You just kind of dealt with it. Just counted to 3, but
I think there's a new version of Humira out in the States that is lower pH.
Yeah, and we haven't gotten around to that because, as everybody here probably knows, insurance can be a little annoying when it comes to switching things around like that. They don't quite like that very much.
I was on Enbrel for a long time. I gave myself the pen, and it was awful. I iced for 15 minutes before, and it made things a lot better, but I just switched to Humira 2 months ago, and it has been life-changing with the citrate-free. I don't even feel it.
Yeah, and actually to add to that, I had the version that had the preservative in it, and that hurt a lot. And then I switched over to the stuff that you had to actually premix, or the stuff that wasn't premixed rather, and you had to mix it yourself. And that doesn't really hurt as much. It only hurts to really insert it, and that's about it. So.
Yes, thank you. Shadi from Palestine wants to know the level of neutropenia after you all started, some of you, Humira or Enbrel. Because with his daughter, who is 11 years old, who was diagnosed with DADA2, even with Remicade, because she was put on Enbrel and Humira, and now she's on Remicade. Even with Remicade, her neutropenia is like 0. So what's the level of neutropenia after you all started Enbrel and Humira? Was it improved? Have you noticed any changes?
I'm not sure if...
So I don't think any of us have actually had neutropenia.
Yeah, I was just about to ask that. Yeah.
What's the level of neutropenia after you all started
They've never had neutropenia. That's not something that everybody has. Yeah.
Because with his daughter, she's on Remicade. She was put on Humira, she was put on Ambrel. Her body rejected the two medicines. Then she was put on Remicade, and the level of her neutropenia still remains zero.
Yeah.
You wanted to know what the level of your neutropenia before you started taking the medicine and following. So, well, thank you anyways.
Any other questions? Something over there?
Actually, I would ask Adela what advice you have for a teenage woman coming through this, as I hear her, but any words of wisdom?
Words of wisdom. You put me on the spot.
Sorry.
Philosophy. Yes. No. Really, the best thing you can do is have really supportive people who like make sure that the friends that you have are willing to talk to you about this and listen to you for hours, just talk about random rants that you have related to your health, right? And like that's extremely useful. I guess now that therapy is more acceptable, like definitely if you need to seek out a therapist, like it's definitely like mental health is becoming more of a thing that you can discuss. So I feel like because of the lesser stigma, like it's actually helpful to seek those types of resources. Also, sometimes just finding activities to get yourself sort of to just not think about these things. Like for me recently, I've discovered rock climbing, for instance. And that's been really helpful because I've never exercised since like getting diagnosed with DADA2, right? Like I was in marching band, but that wasn't a whole lot of exercise. But it's like a lot of these like very like, especially when I went to engineering college, right? It was like you sit there in a room and you study. And a lot of like just muscle loss, a lot of joint, like it was just muscle aches and pains that I was like, oh, like maybe this is normal because I've lived with this all my life. And then I started rock climbing and I was like, oh, I don't have pain anymore. This is interesting. And like I also found myself like giving myself like a break from just thinking and overthinking about problems. So just like finding a community and then finding like things for you to do to get your mind off of the stuff that you're going through is really helpful.
I have a question for Jake. Do you know yet what you're hoping to study in college and what you're thinking about doing afterwards?
Currently, I was looking at biomedical engineering for quite some time. A lot of the schools in my area, Colorado's fortunate enough to have relatively decent in-state universities. CSU offers biomedical, but it's a dual major, and double majoring in engineering. I mean, I'd like to be able to say I could do it. I'm not quite sure I could. I've also been looking at a lot at business as well, and I know engineering and business can tie in together, especially with the different clubs I'm in, because a lot of it is learning to communicate ideas to people and work within teams. And I think that also is a big deal here, and that's kind of like what I wanted to tell my sister, because it's important that you find friends who are understanding that you can work within a team. Because my friends, we go hiking frequently. We just find things that you want to do that you can build each other up on and hang out with one another, and people who are supportive. And luckily for us guys, girls are far more understanding and empathetic. So sometimes it's a little easier for us to find a good girl, but I know it doesn't go both ways. So I wouldn't say don't rely on any boys, not for a while, because we can be pretty stupid.
Okay. Hang on, I'm coming.
Having kind of grown up now, is there anything looking back that you wish your parents or your teachers or school would have known or done in order to support you with living with DADA2?
Yeah.
Good question.
We can just each answer it if you. I'll just pass it down. Okay. Teachers was like it comes with a lot of different battles having this sort of thing. Teachers, first off, in elementary school, teachers don't expect elementary school kids to come to school and be like, "Oh, hey, I was gone for a week or two because I had a stroke." They don't expect to hear those type of things. So it's already hard enough trying to get through that wall between a student and a teacher, especially when it comes to something like this. But communication is extremely important, especially going through counselors. I've learned that helps a lot. talking to your counselor, because then you can tell your counselor what you've got going on, and then they're a little bit better at relaying the information to teachers, plus the teachers have to listen to the counselor. So they don't really have much of a choice of saying, well, you were gone, so I'm going to make this late credit. The counselor can tell them, well, they were gone for a good reason. So just having an open line of communication within your schools. And as far as family goes, I was fortunate enough that both of my parents were very good at understanding this. And I think my dad has also been very good at teaching me never to feel sorry for yourself, as I touched on earlier, and that your circumstances don't make you. You can make whatever you want of your circumstances. And I think that's really important for a lot of people to be telling their children that it is okay. Like, if you do feel sorry for yourself, that's not a bad thing. That's completely normal. But try to avoid loathing and just kind of like sinking into a depressive state, and instead use the special circumstances you have, good or bad, as a reason to make yourself a better person. And friends, as I touched on as well, you have to make sure that you're looking for understanding and empathetic people, because you want to make sure that you're surrounded by people who are willing to understand what you have going on. And I mean, some of my friends still aren't very good at it, because not all of them are very bright, but they're still loyal and nice and understanding to their capacity. So just finding people who can understand you is basically what's extremely important.
Well, my parents did everything right. They let me grow up, and they helped me wherever they could. And I have nothing to exclaim about my parents. School did what they could, but that's nothing. No, everything I wanted from my parents and school is good. And as I said, I have no friends, so.
So for me, my mom was always adamant that I was definitely saying that there was like the symptoms that I was feeling were real. And my dad was like on the total opposite side, where he was like, no, this is all in your head and you're making it up. So that was a really hard like space to be in, where it was like, well, is he right? Or is my mom right? Or like, is my mom freaking out too much? Like, that was a hard place to be in. So just sort of like, from a parent, like me thinking back, like what could I have told my parents if I was like, you know, somebody entirely different, like a physician that they would listen to? It'd be like, you should really listen to your kid, and like, they're not going to lie to you about feeling uncomfortable or being in pain or not feeling comfortable with a doctor or whatever, right? For school, actually, there's a funny story. So I was having pretty low energy levels when I was in my senior year of high school, and you know, I was kind of like putting my head down, or no, it wasn't senior year, it was like sophomore year of high school rather. And I was putting my head down on my table, like, you know, first period, like after marching band, I was like, I'm exhausted, right? And I got called into my counselor's office, and she goes, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, you know, I don't know, I think I'm fine, it's whatever. And she looked at my arms, and I had libido, right? And she was like, are your parents abusing you at home? And I was like, oh, yeah, those do look like bruises, don't they? No, right? Not physical abuse, no. So, yeah, there's like just having the sort of, and I remember like when I first got diagnosed and then going to I had a whole meeting. I called like a roundtable meeting with my counselors, my teachers, like, and this is like, you know, my last year of high school, and I was like, hi, I'm about to start therapy. I don't know what I'm going to actually be like during this process. Just be understanding. And they were all like, yeah, we'll be understanding. But I think it's also really hard without giving like concrete examples to some of the teachers that I've never really seen this before. Like these are, or even to high school counselors, right? How do you talk through like having these sort of internal problems that no one can really see except for physical manifestations like rashes or nodules or they're just strange erratic behavior. Like there's just, it's making sure that you have people who are willing to help you in either the school administration side or like at home and talking to your parents or something that like helps to have that open conversation is really important.
Anybody else?
Hello. In France, we're lucky enough to have people who help us out in the classroom. There's this young lady's daughter has a person who's there to help her out, to sort of coach her, tutor her, even grab a pen for her. And c'est un système qui existe ailleurs. And is that a kind of system that exists beyond the French borders?
In my public school experience, no.
In the Dutch school experience, no.
Yeah, I wouldn't say the American public schools have those particular resources, but it's kind of up to the teenager themselves to take it upon themselves to find support systems, to look for those people that they can talk to, like counselors and such, and communicating with everybody. And I think that might actually be a good skill for people to learn how to do. But yeah, in our school system, you kind of have to figure out how to work your way around it and deal with it.
So, hang on.
Yeah.
I'm the school administrator.
Right.
Just so you know, there are actually resources. Most people don't know about them, and you have to be an advocate for your child. Every school has an intervention and referral services program. The principal usually runs that. There are medical plans and 504 plans that this diagnosis would help you get. So please reach out to your schools and don't be afraid to do that, because if you don't, you won't know it exists and you won't get that help.
Yeah, it definitely varies a lot by school, but it's really important that parents advocate for their kids on that. We're in the New York City public schools, and we actually have a lot of resources available. Lana has something. Yes.
A big part of my work is working with schools, and thank you for saying that before I did. A few things. So I've mentioned neuropsych evaluations, or working with a pediatric psychologist, or part of your team in a hospital. We have a school liaison that would actually become expert on the condition and then translate the needs of the student. So when I do an evaluation, I have a partner that will go and talk to the school about that. I attend school meetings, usually by phone, to convey the information about the rare diseases that I'm working on, and then what the very specific tailored plans are. And then one more thing I just want to mention is that to get school services doesn't mean that you have a learning disability or a learning problem. It could be to address something like fatigue or some of the physical symptoms that we've been talking about. So there are lots of pathways depending on what the specific issues are.
And,
Thank you.
I was just going to touch on the 504. I actually do have the 504, and it is helpful for things like the ACT and SAT, because you get extended time to make sure that you have enough time to complete the actual test. And it definitely is a good resource for people who deal with something like this that keeps them out of school. I had it because freshman year, my teacher said it was equivalent to missing 33 24-hour days of school, which was a large chunk of class time, and I had difficulty, because I would come in at the start of a unit and kind of learn the basics, but then I would miss fundamentals, and then I would try and take the test without it. And the 504 definitely helped try and open up a line of communication with some teachers, but also, at the time, being a young boy, I kind of let my pride get in the way. So I never really used that as a reason to do all these things, and I kind of pushed myself to try and be and hit all the expectations that everyone else was doing, even though I was kind of set back. And when my friends actually just found out this year that I had the 504, and they were getting a little irritated with me, because they were you have the 504 and you don't just use that to get extended time on homework. But obviously, it is a good resource, and I do recommend that parents with children going through schools look into certain things like that to try and figure out if they can modify the way that their kid can communicate with the teachers.
Great.
Well, I'm sure it was an issue, a bigger issue for you guys, because you didn't even know your disease was. So no one even wanted to believe that you had anything. Correct?
Yeah.
So how did your parents feel after you told them that?
Well, my mom sort of already knew from the angiograms and stuff that they had done when I was in high school. Oh, there must be something wrong. When I finally explained that it was a genetic thing, they kind of freaked out, actually, because they were like, oh my God, what does this mean, right? It's a genetic thing. that means that like we all have it, or like something else is going on. And we sort of had this like sort of like freak out moment. Yeah, like there was a period of time where I was like trying to get, like I definitely had my whole family sort of screened and at least looked at for enzyme activity levels to just sort of get a baseline, you know, because they weren't really going to invest the money in getting a DNA sequence to figure out which mutation was whom. But the enzyme levels actually helped us more or less pinpoint who was a carrier of which mutation, more or less, based off my results. Yeah.
Well, my parents were there when I get the diagnostics, so it was a freak out moment. My parents had blood checks, and we still try to get our family to get blood checks because they think it's not that terrible, because yeah, what's to see on the outside? So we have family members with, we think, could be the same disease, but they wouldn't believe that it is. So yeah, we still try, but we know it doesn't make a difference.
My parents, my mom was a nurse practitioner and then a stroke coordinator. So she had a medical background going into this. So she was good at looking at things objectively. And my dad was very good at letting my mother explain to him what was going on. And that was definitely useful growing up with it, of course, having parents who could work with you to understand it. The only complication I've ever had with family members would be the extended family that has a complication, then comes to my mom and asks, like, does this mean that I have the same thing you guys have? And then they want to do all the testing, and we're just like, you should probably just go talk to your doctor first and make sure it's not something else. And you get that a lot, but that's also not necessarily a bad thing for people to be curious about what's going on.
Great. Oh, over here. Uh-oh.
Yeah. It's okay. Did any of your teachers give you a hard time after you explained to them what you had?
In middle school, I had a teacher, Miss Mayard. She was my 6th grade math teacher. You didn't have to deal with her because she retired the year after I was there, because obviously we gave her a very hard time. She gave us a hard time in return. In middle school, at the time, they had a pink pass that, because I had the kidney damage as one of the side effects, the portal hypertension that causes high blood pressure. And my nephrology doctor recommended that I be drinking a lot of fluids, making sure that I try and keep my blood pressure down, avoiding salt. But a lot of teachers have bathroom passes, and I had a pink pass given to me by the nurse, and that was to say, like, I could show the teacher it, and that meant I didn't have to use a bathroom pass and I could just go get water. But Miss Mayard was a huge advocate for her bathroom passes. So that was a little bit of a struggle, and I think schools, like you said, offer a lot of support systems for students. There are always going to be some teachers and some students who are unwilling to work with those sort of things, probably more students than teachers. Most teachers I have experienced are pretty good once it comes down to it on trying to understand things. But I will remember Miss Mayard for making things difficult. But yeah.
That's sort of what I was getting at, because you didn't have 2 diseases, all you had, so
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, my teachers were very understanding. They understood that I had a disease. They don't know what it was, but they understood if I needed to go to the bathroom, they let me, and well, so my teachers understood.
I definitely tried to get into the science with a lot of them, and then they would more or less tune me out, especially in high school. It was much better once I got to like undergraduate and graduate degree or school in engineering, because then there were actually people with science backgrounds who were willing to talk to me. In college, I was actually really fortunate because one of my professors has basically become like my father figure in my life, because he is able to understand, and he would like bring me to appointments. Like he would sit there with me when I had to get infusions and things like that. Like yeah, that was really helpful, and like yeah, so there are certain people out there, right, that like will come and like just try to take care of you.
I have one question. Is any of you, your parents, feeling guilty for having you sick? I mean, that woman over there, she blames herself for our illness. And I wanted to know if it's something that you lived. You know, it's hard trying to say, Ma'am, it's not your fault, it's something completely random.
I think my mom felt guilty at first, and then we sort of talked about it, and I explained to her how like genetics just works, right? And like how you sometimes you get mutations that aren't actually like, you know, you can't pass them on, and they sort of spontaneously happen, right? Like we were talking about these things, and then she felt better about it. She's also very religious, so I think that sort of was her coping mechanism.
Well, we have a very self-confident family, but I think that everyone feels a little bit guilt, because when I was in the hospital with my third stroke, I felt guilty because I were in the hospital again and my parents have to come visit me, and I guess my brother feels guilty if he needed to be hospitalized again. So I think that my parents feel guilty also, but as I said, we're a self-confident family.
I would say the same to an extent about my family, because both my mom and my dad would jokingly blame each other for what was going on and say, you're the one with the gene mutation, but obviously they both had different variations. A lot of people, it's not necessarily a good thing to look for humor in these situations. Some people it helps, some people it's a good coping mechanism, but it's never, obviously everybody will feel guilty in some sort of way with the, how they're affected or how they contribute to this disease, but it's important to keep in mind that I personally believe that certain things happen for a reason, and that you can use situations and circumstances like these to do things in your life you never would have expected and possibly make your life more meaningful and find self-actualization. So you shouldn't see it as, this is my fault for causing a tragedy. You should see it as, these are the cards we were dealt and we have to play with them, and we might as well make the best of it what we can.
Thank you so much.